I am so excited that we have this session opening up Coastal Futures. It's the first time, I think, that we've really tried to engage with this diversity and inclusion theme. And I'm so proud of all the speakers who are going to be in this session, 6 of us. We've got an hour, and then we've got a panel debate afterwards, who are going to give you examples of how they are working with this in their daily lives. I have to say that Yvette's like, made me tingly. It made me want to expose myself a bit. Not literally. But I don't know, gay, poly, disabled, I was homeless for a bit, fostering, neurodiverse, and all these different aspects. I think you'd find that there are a lot of ways into these communities within people in this room that aren't perhaps as visible as you might think. And we need everybody. We need all those views because we need everybody in this fight for healthy oceans and for healthy people and communities. We need all that creativity and the different ways of thinking, and to seeing a problem differently and coming up with a new solution. We can only do that if we are breaking down some of these barriers, be they financial or time or energy or language barriers. They're barriers we put up, and we need to break down this system a bit so we can get more people in. So I'm excited. I don't want to take up time. I didn't even get a presentation slot, so I'm really excited to welcome the speakers. Some of them are speaking for the first time, so give them a big welcome and be gentle with the questions. The angry people at home on the webinar. And first up, we've got Sam Richardson, who's going to talk about the One Coast Coalition. Welcome.
Wow. Thank you. And a hard set of speakers to follow already, so I'll do my best. Morning, I'm Sam Richardson. I'm Director of the National Coastal Tourism Academy, and I'm going to give you an overview of something called the One Coast Coalition. You heard Sally mention it earlier. Some context, really, to start us thinking about coastal aspiration, community aspiration, and the Pledge for the Coast. So, first of all, who is One Coast? What are we? Well, actually, we started it as a group of 4 stakeholders who were planning to have Year of the Coast 2021. And then along came this thing called COVID. And we very quickly realised that each of us were talking to different government departments, and they were all asking us the same question, and that maybe it would be useful to go back to those government departments with a coordinated response. And so, thus, One Coast was born. We did lots of things during COVID. We co-signed letters to Secretaries of State, to the Chancellor, to the Prime Minister, trying to make sure that the coast's voice was heard, that our community voices were heard. And where we are now, we have an advisory group that meet quarterly and includes people like the RNLI, National Trails, the Fishmongers Company, as well as the 4 logos that you see on the screen there that were the sort of founding partners, if you like. But it's an open group. We want to collaborate, we want to work together. It's about making sure that the coast's voice is heard. And definitely, if you're not in that room, please join us, would be my starting point. The theme for this session is community aspiration and inclusivity. And I thought it's important for us to think about where our starting point is. Last year, we commissioned a piece led by the Coastal Communities Alliance, a landmark piece of research, Sally mentioned it earlier, by Pragmatics. And the headlines from that report showed that coastal areas have a lower life expectancy, a lower household income, our productivity is lower, it gets better, trust me, that we have less access to gigabit broadband, our labour force participation rate is lower than our inland areas. And for any of us that work in the coast, that's not new news. We know a lot of that. But the data now backs us up. It's there in black and white. We can use it. And the research didn't just look at coast versus inland. It looked at coast versus other bits of the coast at a local and micro level. And it won't surprise you again that not all coastal communities are created equal. We have huge variances in health, living standards, pay, crime, the list goes on. And so I think when we talk about community aspiration and inclusivity, it depends where you're starting from, and it depends on your sphere of influence. But we all have a sphere of influence. And I thought I'd take you one step further with an example from the visitor economy, not least because it's my area of expertise, in my comfort zone. Prior to COVID, 15 to 20% of employment in coastal communities was in tourism and hospitality. That rises to more than 50% in places like Newquay, Whitby, Exmoor. And the perception might be that during COVID, tourism boomed. You probably all remember the nice summer that we had in 2020 and 2021, and it seemed like our coastal areas were busy. But actually, if you look across the whole year, we are significantly below where we were in 2019. Now, it would be remiss of me to not point out that the national data has had a methodology change between those two sets of data. But actually, even if you take that out of the equation, day visits and spend are lower than they were pre-COVID. Overnight visits have decreased. And our business data tells us that for summer 2023, it was worse than summer 22, which is the data you've got here. If anyone else was camping on the coast in the school holidays in summer 23, you'll know why that was. And the visitor economy, and in fact many sectors of our economy, aren't included in a lot of funding formulas. If you take, for example, our support for coastal defences, it doesn't factor in the value that comes from our visitor economy. Now, that's data, and data's great, we need it, certainly if we're talking to government. But it doesn't tell us the story of the fantastic businesses, community groups, residents that are full of aspiration and trying to drive forward our coastal communities. And there's lots of reasons to actually be optimistic. It's not all doom and gloom. Coastal visitors are highly satisfied. As a nation, we love our coast. European visitors are starting to return, and they spend more than our domestic visitors. Interest in being more sustainable whilst you're on holiday has grown significantly. And we now see more than half of visitors saying that they would consider using public transport, walking or cycling when they reach the destination, but also taking more UK breaks instead of those short European fly holidays. Interest in being outdoors, wellness, has all grown significantly as a result of COVID, and that really well aligns to the coastal product. So there's lots to be done, but there is lots of opportunity, and we've got to look forward, we've got to look with optimism, and we've got to build on that aspiration that exists. Building on that aspiration, celebrating it, we led a campaign, Year of the Coast 2023. It was about trying to reinvent the one we had for 2021 planned, for starters. But actually, it changed quite a lot. We looked at how we come out of COVID. We looked at how we recover from the cost of living crisis. This was not, I really stress, this was not a big government-funded initiative. This was driven by communities, stakeholders, businesses, celebrating and amplifying, coordinating everything amazing that happens on our coasts every day of every year. And it was a chance to have a conversation to raise the profile of our coastal voices and make sure that we are heard. In terms of what we did, Sally mentioned the pragmatics research, the headlines I gave you earlier. We worked with the APPG. We had meetings, countless meetings with ministers, MPs, the shadow government ahead of this election year to make sure that coast was front and centre. We ran a visitor campaign, there were community events, and I particularly love this picture here. This is South Tyneside Festival Summer Parade that used Year of the Coast as their theme, and every different float was a different coastal theme. The Isle of Wight did it too, I have to stress. But we wanted it to be more than 1 year. Year of the Coast is great, but it's just a year. How do we build a legacy? And that's where the idea for the pledge started. The idea came from Sharon in the Coastal Partnership East. I don't know if she's here. And then it was taken up by the LGA Coastal SIG, and Becky is here. And in fact, her stand is right outside. So if any of you miss it, I'm going to be really disappointed. And the pledge is a call to action. How can we all support the coast in our everyday lives? We all play our part. Coastal communities, landscapes, we can all make them better by doing one small thing, one change. Let's all move forward in the right direction. We could pledge to change our behaviour, thinking about being plastic-free. We could encourage our local council to support a motion for the ocean. We could join the call for a minister for the coast, and we've heard that, yes, it's been put as a higher priority on the Levelling Up Minister, but would be even better to have our own minister, wouldn't it? We could be a considerate or more sustainable visitor. Everyone can make a difference, and we can make our community, lives, and environment much better. And that leads nicely into our 2024 campaign, A Coast for All. This is about maintaining that momentum that we started on Year of the Coast, encouraging those stakeholders, that aspiration, and working together. We want to showcase that the coastline has assets that are for everyone, exploring how we can make it more accessible, more welcoming. Ultimately, we want to get to a place where we have a year-round sustainable economy that provides opportunities for all and addresses inequalities that we mentioned earlier. So to finish, I think, personally, we have one of the most stunning and diverse coastlines of anywhere in the world. Whilst there's a lot to do, we're at a low starting point on some factors. We can all make a difference. So I encourage you to make your pledge, literally outside the door. Becky will grab you. Get involved in the Coast for All campaign, and thank you.
Brilliant, right? There's an action, a positive action we can all take in our seats, but preferably, in the break when you're having a drink. I'm still excited by the energy and all the things people are doing. This is great. Next, we've got Nikki Rimington from Natural Resources Wales. Hello. Who's going to be talking about approaches to integrated coastal management for future generations. And I just want to remind you that if you have got questions for any of the speaker, you can put them on Slido, and then we're going to have that panel session at the end, so we can ask them then. Write them down. Keep them in your mind.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. Right. Here we go. Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to give some perspectives from Wales. Around integrated coastal management for future generations. I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the challenges and the complexities in this area of work, but also some of the opportunities and a little bit about some of the things that NRW is doing internally to try and kind of help that integrated agenda. So I'll do a little bit of scene setting to start. We all know about the climate change risk we're facing. Sea levels are rising. I've put a table on the slide there that shows the increased risk of flooding from the sea over the next 100 years or so. And you can see that's quite significant. But also to note that this is not a problem for the future. It's a problem we're already living with. And the map on the right shows the locations of impact from the winter storms of 2013, 2014. And you can see that we experienced really widespread impacts around our coast, which took quite a considerable time to recover from. So it's not just a future problem. So why does integrated coastal management matter? I probably don't really need to explain that to this audience, but we'll run through it for the sake of completeness. First of all, 60% of the population of Wales live on the coast. Over 3/4 of our coast is designated or recognised for its environmental importance, and it's really important to the economy. So lots of things there listed on the slide, but really if we want those kind of those vibrant and thriving communities, we need all pieces of the jigsaw to be thought about when we're considering how we go about integrated coastal management. Again, I don't intend to go through this very busy slide in any sort of detail. There's a cluster of kind of organisations and sectors in the dark green over on the left, and they are perhaps those that would be involved in some of the conversations more strategically. And those in the bluer boxes on the right are perhaps those that would be involved in some of the more local or project level conversations. There's overlap between the two. It's a really busy and diverse space in terms of the range of interests. But actually, if you take any number of those boxes, let's take industry, for example, that's not one amorphous blob with one set of interests and one set of people and one set of perceptions. That's really, really diverse in itself. So I guess what I'm trying to communicate through this busy slide is that, there's lots and lots of different interests that we need to try and engage with and understand their perspectives when we're working in that sphere of integrated management. So I think Wales is special. I'm not from Wales, but I've lived there for most of my life. And what makes us special, apart from just being Welsh, of course? First of all, our unique legislation. We have the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which we've had for a few years now. And under that act, there are 7 wellbeing goals, which are shown in the pie chart in the middle of the screen. So that includes things like a Wales of thriving communities, a more resilient Wales, a healthier Wales, etc. And public bodies are required to think about how we can meet all of those wellbeing goals, not just 1 or 2 of them, but all of those wellbeing goals in the work that we do. We also have the Environment Wales Act, which has 9 principles of the sustainable management of natural resources, which is shown in that diagram on the right-hand side. And again, that really drives what we do. But importantly, underpinning these pieces of legislation, we have 5 ways of working shown there at the bottom. And that really sets the stall out for public bodies in Wales about how we should be going about doing things. And the how is really, really important. We also have Natural Resources Wales, which brings together, we're about 10 years old now, brings together the remit of several legacy bodies and some other functions as well, such as marine licensing, and that gives us a real opportunity for integrated working. And we are trying to work together under our vision of nature and people thriving together. And I think our size is an advantage. We're big enough to make a difference, but also small enough to build some of those meaningful relationships and hopefully develop collaborative solutions together. Again, I'm not going to go through the detail on this slide, but I just wanted to flag a recent report by the Climate Change Committee on Adaptation and Social Justice, and it was commissioned by Welsh Government. And it's really a really interesting report that draws out 3, sorry, I can't read with my glasses, that adapting to a changing climate relates to social justice in 3 key ways, and that there are 6 principles that we need to be thinking about to develop socially just adaptation policies. So I'm not going to go through them, but this is another piece of information that we can sit alongside the legislation that we've got to really help challenge our thinking and our ways of doing things. So what can NRW do? I think we're about 2,500 staff now, and I would estimate that about 10% of our staff have some sort of role which has involvement in management of the coast. And by that I mean more of the physical management rather than things like bathing water quality, which would be a whole load of other people as well. And that includes a really kind of diverse range of roles and responsibilities, from flood risk management, designated sites, climate change, marine licensing, planning, etc. There's lots there on the slide. So a few years ago, myself and a colleague, Louise Pennington, who works in strategic flood risk management with a kind of coastal role, both of us found ourselves being contacted by lots of different colleagues or working with lots of different colleagues at the coast, and felt that there was a growing need to try and bring everybody together across this really diverse remit that we have. And so we set up a kind of internal kind of mechanism which we've given a rather grand name of the Integrated Coastal Management Programme, but it's really just aiming to bring us all together to coordinate, plan and prioritise our work at the coast in what is a really difficult environment to manage, of course, and to try and work in line with those principles of the sustainable management of natural resources. So we've got that kind of much broader internal coastal community than we had a few years ago. And we kind of organise our work and our discussions under the 5 themes shown there on the slide. I just want to flag a couple of examples of things that we've done. And what I would say is that it's not just what we've done, but how we've done it and why we've done it that has mattered, because it's been the relationship building along the way, understanding each other's perspectives, that has been just as important as the kind of, the new website or whatever. One of the things that colleagues were telling us was that they were finding it really difficult to have conversations with stakeholders and customers around the challenges of coastal adaptation and what shoreline management plans mean, etc., and what the risks are. So we have worked quite hard over the last few years to improve what we've got in terms of our web content and our mapping, and that is beginning to pay dividends in terms of supporting those conversations. The other example I wanted to share was a project called Coast Snap. So we've been able to bring together our colleagues who work on the Wales Coast Path with our partners in the Wales Coastal Monitoring Centre who primarily are working on collecting data to support flood and coastal erosion risk management in that coastal zone. But we were able to bring them together, and they've collaborated to do something which sounds quite simple, which is put a load of posts around the coast on our coast path where people can take photographs with their mobile phone and upload them to the Wales Coastal Monitoring Centre website. It's a really simple idea, but it's actually been so unbelievably successful in such a short time. It's brilliant to see that that's giving people an opportunity to understand how their coast's changing, contribute to the data, and begin in time to contribute to those decision making as that sort of data set builds up. So it's been really exciting. I'll skip over the next one, just in view of time. So just to wrap things up then, climate change at the coast is here already. The risks are going to increase. We've got a lot of things to think about, a lot of diverse interests. It's really, really challenging. But we really have to sort of try our best to meet those challenges to get sustainable coastal management and a fair approach to adaptation if that's what's required. We've got some really good legislation and ways of working that support how we do things, and I think that's a really good sort of building blocks for where we go next. And we've been able internally to bring staff together and build some of those internal relationships, which hopefully will support better decisions across our remit. But we recognise that there are still huge conflicts between different parts of our remit and the sectors they represent. It's not easy. It's really resource intensive to do all of this. And, you know, we don't have endless pots of money, essentially. But, you know, I'm sure that as time goes on, we can get better at doing things that are more integrated and take better account of the sort of diverse range of interests that we've got. And I'll just finish with the quote at the top there, which says, "Coming together is a beginning, staying together is progress, and working together is success." And I'd say that we in NRW are on that journey for sure, but lots more to do. Thanks, everyone.
Go team, we're being really timely. Thank you. Everyone's getting a drink later. So now we've got a bit of token diversity. Our man, Joe Perry from the Highland Council. Welcome, who's going to talk to you about nature-based solutions for threatened coastal communities. Exciting. You ready?
Yep. Okay, so hi there. Yes, I'm Joe Perry, straight white male from Highland Council. So I'm a project manager with the Highland Council, and today I'm going to introduce you to the village of Golspie, the existential threat that this village is facing from rising sea levels, from coastal surges, and from erosion. And then I'm going to introduce you to our project, Climate Action Coastlines, which we're hoping is going to harness nature-based solutions for these threatened coastal communities. So Golspie is a beautiful, low-lying coastal rural village about 90 minutes north of Inverness. On one side, we have the North Sea, and on the other, the 400-metre hill, Ben Braggy. And passing through this village, some really important transport infrastructure. So there's the only train line and the main trunk road serving the whole of Caithness and much of Sutherland. So Golspie is a planned fishing town which was created during the Highland clearances, which is something that I'm going to talk about in more detail later. The community of Golspie is small and it skews older than the national average. It's not a particularly wealthy place. However, there's a good community spirit in the area, and local people are really engaged in local issues, including around coastal flooding and erosion. Now, many coastal and rural villages, such as Golspie, are struggling with similar challenges today. Many have shrinking and aging populations. They might be far removed from essential services and job opportunities. But on top of this, for Golspie and similar low-lying coastal villages, they're also facing the existential threat of coastal change. Now, Golspie already has quite extensive traditional coastal defences. They're marked in red there. I'm sorry that's not particularly clear, but you can see that stretching across the whole front of the village. I think this is also a good image to understand the scale of Golspie and its relationship with the coastline. So the defences that Golspie has are traditional and trusted. So we have rock breakwaters, steel floodgates at the backs of people's homes, beach renourishment from time to time, rock revetments and gabions, and a sea wall protecting the main high street. Now, these defences have done some good work in past decades to protect Golspie from the worst impacts of storm surges. However, we now know from modelling that this is not going to be sufficient for the future. The Highland Council has been looking at options for Golspie for many years, and in 2019 they brought in an infrastructure consulting firm, ACOM, to carry out the Golspie Flood Protection Study. From this study, they found that doing nothing was just not an option, as the existing flood defences were soon going to degrade and stop providing the kind of defences that the village needed in a changing climate reality. Some of the options, such as beach renourishment and rock breakwaters, offered minimal protection for the village, and even raising the sea wall at the front only provided a temporary period of protection for the village, and local people were really worried about the impact, the visual impact of raising the sea wall for Golspie. And I think some people find that a bit confusing, that when faced with flooding and erosion, they're worried about how it might look, but I think it will help, and later on I'll explain more, to talk a bit about the culture and some of the social context for the village. So 2 years after that study came Dynamic Coast, which is a fantastic project which carried out a range of analysis which built our knowledge base, our understanding of coastal change around the whole of Scotland, and also pushed for adaptation. The sub-report for Golspie, Adaptation and Resilience Options for Golspie and Cool, really underlined the growing threat that Golspie was going to be facing. And if you look at that top recommendation there, you'll see asset relocation and abandonment. So the report really underlined that it was the existence of Golspie that's really at threat. So I want to visualize some of the findings of this Dynamic Coast report, because this is what inspired the project, which I'm going to be talking about today, Climate Action Coastlines. So here you can see the mean high water spring in 2018. And this tool is fantastic. It allows you to look at a changing coastline around Scotland under various emission scenarios. So I'm just going to show you the high emission scenarios now, because those are the ones we use when we're thinking about risk management. So if we jump now to 2060, if you look at the orange lines, and 2100, if you look at the red line, you can see that the mean high water spring in this high emission scenario is already in people's gardens and it's encroaching on people's homes. Storm surges would therefore extend well into the village. Associated with this change, we're also going to have significant erosion. So if you look here, 2050, it's so close. Under a high emission scenario, the main high street is already entirely severed. And now we go to 2100, and I think it's quite clear that the village as it exists today is no longer viable. Now, this information is publicly available, but there are many people living in Golspie or similar coastal villages who are still unaware of just how bad things could get. And I think this really highlights the communication challenge that we all have, and maybe also a community engagement challenge. So raising awareness can be really important. So based on those two, the report and then the Dynamic Coast project, we started looking around for some funding opportunities. And we found the Scottish Government's Green Growth Accelerator, which invests in low carbon infrastructure projects. We put in an application for nature-based flood defences for the Golspie and Cool region, and we were pleased to be accepted onto the Pathfinder part of the project, which gave us £120,000 to put together a business case, carry out community consultation, and do something of an options appraisal for the area that we were looking at. So that's how Climate Action Coastlines, our project, got started. We put together a project team which had a good balance of subject matter expertise, mostly with universities and other government bodies, and also, local expertise as well, so local charities and community groups. We had 3 main aims for the project, looking at the right nature-based solutions for the region, ensuring that community voices were embedded at a really early stage, and also exploring green finance options to continue this kind of work around the Highlands. This is just one village, and there are many like this in the Highland Council region. But before I go into the community consultation anymore, I just wanted to add to that historical and social context. So I mentioned that Golspie is a fishing village that was created as part of the Highland clearances. The clearances took place from the mid-18th to the mid-19th century and consisted of large landowners across the Highlands and Islands, moving small tenant farmers, subsistence farmers mostly, from the interior of the Highlands to the coastal areas because they realized they could make more money by putting in huge pastoral fields, covering them in sheep, and they could get more rent from them. The Highland clearances were often brutal, and in many cases tenant farms were set alight so that they couldn't be reoccupied later. And there's at least one court case from Sutherland at the time of a house being set alight with the residents still inside because some people, really didn't want to leave. The biggest landowner, and at the time the richest man in the world in our region, richest man in the world, biggest landowner in this region, was the Duke of Sutherland. And you can see in the centre there a 100-foot statue to the Duke of Sutherland, which sits on top of the 400-metre hill Ben Braggy and dominates the skyline above Golspie. So there are mixed local views about this statue, and there's been a few attempts to have it removed, and also a number of instances of vandalism, including the word monster being spray painted in big green letters across it. I think this is important context for this session when we're talking about community aspirations and the inclusivity agenda. So Golspie was created as part of the Highland clearances. The original inhabitants were pushed to the coast to make way for sheep, and now the coast is pushing back on modern-day inhabitants. So we wanted to embed these community voices at as early a stage as possible. We carried out guided coastal walks, talking to people about where the tide was going to be at different times as we look forward into the future. We did online discussions, and we held community discussions in important local places. We also brought in the Design Council, who came up to Golspie and helped us to run community-led workshops to talk about the future of Golspie and the really difficult topic of adaptation. So unfortunately, we weren't selected to continue to the full Green Growth Accelerator project, but we have managed to secure some small funding pots to continue our research in the area. And at the moment, we've got a big funding application in with Edinburgh University to do some extensive planning for the integration of the coast with Golspie High Street. So if you just think about that, it's quite a big project to do. But perhaps mostly importantly is the relationships that we've made, not just with project partners, but with the local communities. We're still back and forth with Golspie Community Council on a monthly basis talking about flood matters. So the future of Golspie and many similar communities is really uncertain. There are far too many places for a local authority such as the Highland Council to protect just within the Highland region. As decision makers, we need to really think about prioritising certain places for protection. We need to look at nature-based solutions wherever possible so we're not making the situation worse. And we need to really think about which areas are most able to protect themselves. And I'll just finish on this picture here. 100 years ago, there was already flooding in the Golspie High Street. And I really like this picture. This is a local shop owner. And I just feel like it's quite a cheeky and friendly picture. Yeah. So thank you very much. Thanks.
That was a great one. So interesting. Thank you, Joe. I shouldn't really, but I'm going to do a little plug. We've just put out a report, or it's going to be published soon, called Justice-Led Conservation. It's about looking at colonialism in the UK and the kind of considerations you might want to think about when you are engaging with different communities across Scotland, Wales and England. I should say as well that the speakers are going to be here at the end after the panel debate for 10 minutes, so you can speak to them one-to-one if you want. I'm really not very happy about that because I feel like it means we're going to get the dregs of lunch, and we don't deserve that, but we'll do it for you. Next up, we've got Mandelai Wolfe, Lyme Bay Fisherman. She's going to be talking about a model for small-scale coastal fleet representation for fishers by fishers. Yeah, all right, let's go.
Thank you. Good morning. I am grateful to the Coastal Futures team for inviting me here today to talk about the Lyme Bay Fishermen's Community Interest Company and the journey that these fishermen took to creating a fisherman-led, fisherman-designed representative organization. Our members are scallop divers, trawlermen, potters, netters, and anglers. All of our vessels are under 12 meters, and most are under 8 meters. This is a very weather-dependent fleet with short ranges, a truly, genuinely local inshore fleet. Our members come from across the 4 ports of Lyme Bay, from Beer, Axmouth, Lyme Regis, and West Bay. Many come from fishing families, and some can trace their fishing heritage back over many generations to the 1600s. These, like so many across the UK coast, are iconic to their communities. They are part of the identity of their towns and their villages. They are vital and integral parts of the local tourist jaw and the heritage, as well as providing jobs and income, not just for the fishermen, but for the shore businesses they support. I have worked in and around fishing for over 20 years, and in all that time, there is an acknowledgement that this sector, these inshore fleets, are not well engaged with regulators and policymakers and struggle to have their voices heard when new policy is being developed and delivered. This is the story of how these fishermen came together to change all that. In August 2019, Deputy Director of Fisheries, Anne Freeman, and her team came to Lyme Bay. Over 2 days, they met in the back rooms of bars, quayside cafes, and harbor sides. And what struck me most, what lit the fire for us, was the officials' comments. Of course, some of them have heard these things before, but I was intrigued that a lot of what the fishermen had to say on a whole range of issues, both problems and solutions, just had not been cutting through to DEFRA from the coast. At the time, I was working for the Blue Marine Foundation, and their Lyme Bay project worked with some of the fishermen, but the seed was planted. Something fisherman-led was needed. So we set about talking to some of the fishermen around the ports about setting up a fisherman-led organization, and Blue agreed to let me use my time to help them. The die was cast. So with limited time today, here's a Force 10 blow-through of what we did. First, I spoke to all the fishermen that I knew from the Lyme Bay Marine Project, and then those fishermen set about speaking to the other fishermen around the 4 ports to get a consensus for coming together and designing a fisherman-led organization. We had lots of one-on-one conversations, evening meetings, port visits. What was needed? What would the organization do? With Blue funding, by still paying for my role, we then set up a 1-day workshop run independently so that all the fishermen could come together and thrash out the basics and the details. Should this be a charity or should it be a community interest company? What was the organization going to do? How would the governance be structured? How would this be funded? Now, some of you will know when you get 50 fishermen in the same room that the debate is going to be varied, vocal, and heartfelt. But I was privileged to be a part of that workshop, and it provided us with a clear direction with 2 unanimous, non-negotiable principles. The first, that all fishermen are created equal. Now, this may sound fundamental, but there's some fishermen organizations that have been set up there where the board controls the governance and the work streams. But our fishermen were resolute. If this was going to be a fisherman-led organization, then every single fisherman needed to have a say and they needed to have a vote. From this membership, they themselves nominated and selected who would sit on their board. The second, fishermen must engage with the CIC. Sorry, wrong one. Again, this may sound fundamental, but we've all seen so-called fishing representatives speaking for industry, and of course the fishermen recognize that they would need a shore-based person to represent them. But in the workshop, they made answering surveys, consultations, and providing information to the executive mandatory. So when that representative was speaking on behalf of them, they really were speaking on behalf of the whole membership and not just those with loud voices or dominant people. With Blue's support, still funding my role, we set up I said about registering the CIC. I opened up bank accounts. I then developed a business plan for all the different projects and the work streams that the fishermen had chosen, and then I applied to the Marine Management's Organization's Fisheries and Seafood Scheme, FAST, for the funding to create the organization. The MMO grants team were amazing. I cannot say this enough. The very nature of the work streams that the fishermen had chosen in the workshop meant that beyond core funding, I had to access different areas of the Fisheries and Seafood Scheme, and I am so grateful for the support that they gave me throughout this process and ultimately for the approval of the project. So with the bid approved and Blue Marine Foundation giving us the match funding, in January 2023, the CIC was up and running. And so in the last 12 months, we have delivered our seafood trail. We have local businesses that are around the 4 ports that are supporting the use of local catch, and we will be continuing to build on this in 2024. We set, designed, and deployed the Lyme-based scavenger hunt. This saw 50 shops and businesses in each of our 4 ports displaying one of the species from the local communities, and it was promoted by the tourist organizations so that locals and visitors alike could go on a trail hunt. They could collect all 50 species with a chance to then win one of our Lyme Bay fish posters, which brings me to the Lyme Bay fish poster. This features all of the 50 species in Lyme Bay on one poster, and it was designed by the amazing local artist Debbie Mason. It's available on our website to purchase, with all proceeds going to the CIC. We have created an education outreach program. This program sees our fishermen going into local primary schools and delivering a free Key Stage 2 presentation. We have also started visiting residential care homes and memory cafes as well. We have developed a cookery book, and this cookery book has recipes from all our fishermen, and that soon will be able to be on our website. We have created a short film, a docu-fishery. We are very excited about this, and it premieres on the 8th of February in Seaton, Devon. Beyond these community-based projects, we have engaged with regulators and politicians. Before the CIC, we rarely saw coastal events with regulators and politicians, but hats off to DEFRA, the MMO, and the IFCAs, because they've made sure now that Lyme Bay is a stop on their coastal tours and their drop-in sessions. As we look to 2024, we are discussing science partnerships internally with membership to help data gaps in species that our fleets depend on. And we will be looking for partners to help shape and work with our fishermen to develop this. But here is the really great news. From around the coast, stories of our work have driven individual fishermen and some port groups to reach out to us because they want to replicate what we've done. So we have plans to create a how-to guide, an easy-to-follow format for fishermen, by fishermen, written for fishermen. But here's the really bad news. Boy, have we struggled to get this funded. FAST scheme closed early, so I reached out to organizations that normally help fishermen, and I'm disappointed to say that one wouldn't accept a bid from us, and another suggested that we needed to join with national organizations like the NFFO or Fishing Into the Future in order to achieve a successful bid. By contrast, DEFRA and the MMO have spent considerable time with us to make sure that others wanting to form an organization in the same way we have will have access to funding and the support that they need. We were lucky enough to have Blue fund my role, but others out there will struggle to do so. We will all have to wait and see what new schemes come forward in the next round of funding, but I'm confident with the engagement that DEFRA and the MMO have had with us that they will find ways to help everyone. For too long, the narrative has been the UK needs better engagement with the thousands of fishermen around the coast, that their voices need to be heard, and that they must be helped and supported to be as sustainable as possible. It's a real shame we couldn't get our how-to guide funded sooner, but we have plans to do that in the next round of FAST. So I just wanted to finish and say I'm hugely proud of what my fishermen have done. It's what conferences like this have been saying for years. Small scale, truly inshore fleet, having more access to policy in development and engagement and support. So, my final thought today is what can you do to help?
It's amazing, isn't it? Yay! You're right. We have been saying this is needed forever, and thank you so much for your energy and there you are, helping it come to life. And I can't wait for the how-to guide. There's a weird sound, isn't there? Like it's a bit spooky, but it's actually making me feel really at home. I live in Southsea, and when the fog comes down, the ship horn sounds. I'm like, yeah. Next, we've got Elaine Hayes. There we go. Chief Executive of Plymouth Sound National Marine Park. And we are talking about developing a marine identity for people, planet, and place.
Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much to Natasha and the team for having me along. I have to be honest, when I heard where the conference was this year, I panicked big style. I have seen this room on television for years and years, as many of you will have done. And I don't know if you know, but it is actually the longest running science lecture series run from the Royal Institution. And in 1973, a not very well-known individual who goes by the name of David Attenborough stood here. So now I feel really scared. But I think when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, it's also important to reflect that the first female who stood here to give the Royal Institution Christmas lecture was in 1994. And you sucked your teeth at that one. But the first black man to stand here to give a Royal Institution lecture was in 2020. Something to think about. Now, we've all been sat down far too long, so we're going to get you moving. So we're talking about marine identity, and this is a relatively straightforward question, so get ready. Stand up if you think you have a marine identity. Well, hey, look at the room, look around you. Fantastic. Now, I'm hoping that Coastal Futures has done its usual thing, which is that you end up sat next to somebody you've never met in your entire life. And so I'd now like you to turn to the person you've never met in your entire life, and in one sentence, explain your marine identity. You have 10 seconds. Go. Amazing. Right, bit of hush, please. Shh. Right. Now here's the hard bit. Stay standing if you think you're a marine citizen. Oh, we've got a few departing. And do exactly the same. Turn to the other person and explain to them what a marine citizen is. One sentence. Go. Right, that's brilliant. Bit of hush again. Find your seats. Settle. You may have found that second task a little bit harder than the first task. Stay awake, you might hear a bit more. So, in starting this presentation, I thought it might be useful just to talk a little bit about national marine parks, because not everybody is familiar with what we're trying to achieve. So I thought I'd do a slight warm-up about Plymouth Sound and what we've been up to. So the park was actually declared in 2019. It's permissive, not regulatory. So we just decided that we wanted one and we were going to make one, so there. So we did. We have submitted a very large bid to the National Lottery Heritage Fund, more of that later. And we're working locally and nationally to provide a roadmap for national marine parks, as well as developing a 5-year strategy. The park was developed with extensive consultation, and you can see that through many of the documents that already exist. And by that I mean we spoke to real people about real issues in language that they could understand, in places and spaces that they knew and recognised. But we also needed to sell this. And what we needed to think about was we wanted to change the paradigm around national parks. Nothing wrong with national parks, they're great. But we're talking about national marine parks, a modern version for the future. And what we fundamentally wanted to do was to make sure that embedded at the heart of any national marine park was a place and a space where people and planet could come together to have a sustainable relationship with their sea, with their coastline, with their beaches, with any bit of the marine environment that they held dear. But in order to do that, we needed to create a movement of change across the city. And for that, we conceived the Heritage Horizons project. And the aim of the project is to create an entire city, 247,000 people, of marine citizens. So you lot, you're a walk in the park by comparison to what's coming over the hill, should we get the funding. And we also wanted to connect our national marine park worldwide digitally. So what's a marine citizen? Well, it's somebody who likes the sea, isn't it? Yes, I think it is. But I think it's more than that. And in order to create the UK's first national marine park, we needed to deliver a citywide transformation project around landscape and nature. And over the last 2 years, we have been working on a development phase of that project to build support for our bid, but also for us to debunk our own myths, to understand our own misconceptions, and to build a really genuinely robust project. We have then resubmitted our bid, and it is radically, radically different from where we started. So, we put people at the centre of our bid. Why? Because people are the ones who can help us look after nature better. People are the ones who can advocate for nature if we give them the tools and the pathway to be able to do that. People are the solution for nature. And this bid will give us the opportunity to give everyone in Plymouth the opportunity to develop a marine identity and to look at how we can build pathways for people to become marine citizens, like this lot. So the work we're doing will use both in-person and digital connectivity. But it would be remiss of me not to give you a definition for marine citizenship. The work that we're doing and the programme has been designed based on the work by Dr. Pam Buchan, who's here today. So if you want an expert on marine citizenship, you should talk to Pam. If you want an expert on how to navigate your way around Plymouth at night, probably I'm the person. So here's the definition. It's a heck of a thing, isn't it? And I'm not saying it doesn't have a place in the world, but I'm not sure all of our audiences would have understood the words. The average reading age in Plymouth is about age 9. And this lot certainly weren't interested. They kind of like this version. This is the Elaine version. So, love it. Got to be able to get there if you want to love it. Learn about it, connect to it, and act to save it. And what do we learn from our development phase? We learned that access to the marine environment is still a privilege, not a birthright. We discovered that people struggle to understand some of the concepts around the beach. I went to the beach and there wasn't one. We laugh because we understand. But if you had taken your kids and used the last of your money to get your kids to the beach and it hadn't been there, it's no joke, really. We found a desire for people to be connected to the sea, but no way of getting there. We worked alongside some of our faith groups and accepted that our infrastructure was actually a barrier to them connecting. We sat down with our low-income families and heard and felt their frustration that they couldn't afford to take their kids to the sea. And we were grateful to all of them for their honesty. So having discussed that in detail, we've produced a project, and I don't expect you to read that. Just like that. And I've got 1 minute left. And the important thing for us is that we need to learn throughout the project, and we're going to evaluate it using an R&D mindset developed collaboratively with the lottery should they continue to fund us. And we will change the way that we work in order to make sure that every citizen of Plymouth can have a marine identity and a path to marine citizenship. Because if you want something that you've never had, you must be willing to do something that you've never done. Thank you. The more observant of you may have noticed that I haven't left the stage, because I have a little advertorial to add in at this point. All of us have been blessed to have Blue Marine Foundation in our lives, as Mandelai said earlier. And they have helped us over the last 5 years spearhead the development of Plymouth Sound National Marine Park. But it won't be the only one. And we're on a journey to develop national marine parks across the UK and are being supported by amazing groups of people from grassroots communities to try and do this. We have a national strategic working group which helps us understand some of the challenges that we're facing. And in autumn 23, there was a major event in London supported by Blue, and we looked at how we could develop a 10-step programme for the evolution within our communities. And we're also absolutely delighted that Scottish Government have grabbed the bull by the horns and are working really, really hard through their grassroots coastal communities, and Blue is working on this as well, and we're incredibly grateful to everyone. But really, it's time we started democratising this process further. And what we're going to do is have an online workshop. So any of you are welcome to join so that you can understand where we've got to on our journey. You can ask us the hard questions if you don't ask them later on Slido, because I gather that's a bit of a hotbed. I don't know what it is about Slido. It makes you really brave, doesn't it? So you're really welcome to sign up, come and ask for details, it would be delightful to have you on our journey. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Elaine. You literally made my dreams come true, because all last night I was terrified someone was going to jump off the balcony or fall off the balcony. And you got them all standing. All my anxiety. It's making me sweat. But thank you. Great presentation. Next up we've got, and this is our last one, so a big round of applause to welcome Jetska. who's from the Wales Coast and Seas Partnership, who's going to be talking about investment literacy and capacity building, action for future generations. And then following that, we shall be doing our Slido panel debate. And obviously you can ask questions as well. We've got roving mics, so get thinking.
Well, if you're anything like me, you're ready to get up, aren't you? And so, yeah, thanks, Elaine, for getting people standing a little bit. But we're nearly there, nearly at lunch. Save some for us. So I'll be talking about the Wales Coast and Sea Partnership, or CASP Cymru for short, and I might use that a little bit just to get us going a little bit faster. Funny, I'm Dutch, so yay, Brexit. But yeah, I'll bring the other international to our panel. And the reason why I get to present, I guess, is all stems from doing this a lot. So like most Dutch people, we go to France all summer, camped on a really basic campsite, and did a lot of bodyboarding and rock pooling and so on. I realized I was really lucky that I got to do that. But it did bring me to Wales, which is very similar to the West Brittany coast. And where I now live and have done for 25 years. And I work with Pembroke Coastal Forum, where we help to create opportunities and work on challenges for coastal peripheral regions. And for me and for my organization, it's really important that those opportunities are just for all. So not just for the people who are there by choice, like myself, but also those by chance. We're a community interest company. We're pretty unique in our setup as a coastal forum in Wales and in the UK in itself. And key to our work is working collaboratively and in partnership with stakeholders and building collaboration. We're therefore a really active partner for the Coast and Seas Partnership. And I'll outline a little bit of the work that we do as that partnership. But there's lots of other partners in the room. So if I can get you to stick your hand up if you are working for an organization that's part of the Coast and Sea Partnership. Come on, yes, there's a few. So please do seek these people out in the breaks in the next 2 days to ask a little bit more about our work, because it's a real whistle-stop tour. I tried to imagine what would be helpful for you in the room as part of this, so I'll come up with some case studies and ideas and a little bit more about the partnership in itself. Very briefly, Pembroke Coastal Forum, we are a dynamic platform to try and find solutions. We do that around things like the climate and nature emergency. As outlined by Nikki, we have the Future Generations Act in Wales, and we directly contribute to that, even though we're not bound to, as we're not a public body. And we work towards the net zero agendas in both Wales and the UK. Common threads, like I said, are around collaboration and stakeholder engagement. We're in our 24th year at the moment, and if you want to know a bit more about us, have a look at our website, where the impact reports and the timeline tell you all about our history. One program that's very long-standing is our Marine Energy Wales work, where we bring together the technology developers, supply chain, academia, and the public sector to work on sustainable marine energy generation, and that includes floating offshore wind. Floating offshore wind is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the Celtic Sea regions. And we want to make sure that that opportunity includes regeneration, sustainability, and involvement of communities. We do that through our networks like Marine Energy Wales, but also the Celtic Sea Developer Alliance and the Celtic Sea Cluster. And we're really ramping up the work with community on that as well. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. So our coasts and seas are vital to our well-being, and with the Welsh Marine Zone doubling the size of Wales effectively, and as a coastal nation, our marine ecosystems are crucial to our culture and our language. And things are a little bit different in Wales, as we like to say. So to support coastal communities and realise our vision of a clean, healthy, safe, productive, diverse Welsh sea, we have come together as the Coast and Seas Partnership, CASP Cymru. It evolved from WMAG, another great acronym, Wales Marine Action and Advisory Group. This one's slightly better. And some of the logos on the screen are some of the partners, but there's many more, from business, energy, fishing, community, environment, local government, and recreation. So we work in a sort of code design way, focusing on inclusion, collaboration, and networking, all the buzzwords from today. Future Generations Act, as mentioned, focuses on the long-term sort of considerations, really, and around collaboration, and is aiming to address things like poverty and climate change as well. The Coast and Sea Partnerships really aligns with that vision and the goals and the 5 ways of working. And we work in 3 main areas of focus at the moment. We're co-developing an ocean literacy strategy, we're creating the Marine Fund Cymru, and we're launching the Coastal Capacity Building Fund to enhance skills and networks. And I'll tell you a little bit more about each of those areas now. So the ocean literacy strategy in Wales, Amor Ani, or the CNS, brings together the members from the Coast and Sea Partnership to consolidate the work that they're doing and to address any of the gaps that are there and take other action. A strategy and action plan will be delivered later this year, and it will have a vision, goals, action areas there. Catherine Hughes, who's hopefully here, I think so, is very ably coordinating us, and there is a lot of partners there. So if you do want to get involved, please reach out to her. Emails on the screen, or talk to me after. The second area of work is around blue investment and the focus on long-term investment from public and private finance to achieve those key objectives. There's a very active blue investment working group, and we meet monthly, and we're working on a blended finance mechanism called Marine Fund Cymru. Cymru means Wales, if you didn't know. It will be a mechanism to pool funds and to really work on ocean positive action. And Gareth Gunningham is very ably coordinating us through that. So in its early days, but we're working on what the steering groups and governance will look like with the Coast and Sea Partnership. Then, in terms of building capacity, let's go one further, we're working on community engagement to address those local challenges, so something very close to my heart and Pembrokeshire Coastal Forum as well. We're working on a coastal capacity building challenge fund, or have worked on that, which is sitting next to the marine and fishery sort of more traditional schemes, to really involve more communities in this agenda. Last year was the first year that it was issued to groups, and despite very short delivery timelines, something we always advocate to not do with community groups, but despite that challenge, 14 good projects came forward and delivered in a couple of months. Then for this cycle, further projects have been allocated funding, and the ocean literacy strategy is one of them. And the 3 examples from last year's funding round also got allocated funding, and I'll run you through those 3 examples very briefly now. So one of them was the Anglesey Menai Strait Sustainable Catchment Management Initiative, quite a mouthful, which is focusing on water quality. And as you can imagine, water quality is very important, well, anywhere, but for the Menai Straits, well-being of businesses, residents, and wildlife as well. So the project focused on understanding the factors that affect water quality and brought together a forum of partner organizations. Some of the learning, unsurprisingly to me, was that community engagement and involvement is really important in finding solutions, and also that a data-driven approach is crucial for informing decision-making and identifying opportunities for innovation. And that project has funding to continue and build a forum. Another forum, the Glamorgan Coast Forum, was explored in the 2022 round and enabled working together and understanding the skills and capabilities of those coastal communities better. It had sessions around sustainable growth, nature recovery, and coastal adaptation. And like I said, funding will support sort of the building of this forum as well. And then finally, a project that we ran as Pembrokeshire Coastal Forum, the Marine Energy Engagement Plan, brought together stakeholders through workshops and interviews to really build this plan to bring communities really more to the table in terms of the marine energy and floating wind opportunities in Pembrokeshire to start with. And we know we need to target more underrepresented groups, which is what we'll be doing next, and emphasize inclusivity and co-production, and build that narrative I think Yvette talked about earlier as well, around broadening engagement and also strengthen the governance about the opportunities for marine energy. So we've had some initial funding. We're now got a little bit more, and we're looking for further funds so that we can really continue this and then share our learning to other regions as well. Wrapping up, don't worry. So as mentioned, we know understanding our ocean and coast is really important. That's not always the case. Swansea City is an example where not everyone gets to do that. Myself, I worked with the community police in the town of Haverfordwest, which is 6 miles from the coast on the bus route, and many kids had never been to beaches. That brings me back to my upbringing that brought me to work in this sector in Wales, and I'm lucky enough to do that, but the sector is really small, and we probably know everyone, which is lovely, but it's also probably not what we're looking for. We need to broaden that group, and likewise, that's the same for this room, and I saw some things on Slido to that effect as well. Then finally, Coastal Sea Partnership is really bringing together some of the voices and groups working in this agenda and doing a really good job. Collaboration is absolutely key, as I highlighted through my examples and has been mentioned by the other panelists in this session. And so I really encourage you all to reach out across your sectors, step out of your comfort zones and work with others to increase ocean literacy and bring that wider involvement to this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Jetska. Our last one wrapped up beautifully, and now it all gets a bit messy. But if I can invite the speakers to come and take the seats on their numbers. Yeah. Everybody comfortable? Mm-hmm. Yeah, shake it off, shake it off. Right, so we've got questions coming in from Slido for Hannah, so she's going to raise her hand when she's got something to say. We've got questions that you can have in the audience. You can also ask questions to our keynote speakers if you want, and they will come up to the lectern to answer them. But I'd like to kick off, chair's privilege and all. I saw Peter Barham always does this, and I always wanted to do it, so now I'm doing it. Chair's privilege, you get the first question, don't you? But it's the question in the guide. So if we could go around and have just a little punchy statement or thought on how are coastal and marine practitioners responding to the inclusivity agenda, or not, or if they are, then a little example would be great. Where do we want to start? I'm going to do this voluntary. Yeah.
I like getting it over and done with. It's terrible going last. Well, just to go back to my presentation briefly, so Ocean Literacy Group is really working on broadening that group, shaping the activities. There'll be a Festival of the Sea and so on, so lots more people can get involved, so please do so, or recommend people that should do. In terms of Marine Energy Engagement Plan, we are working on actions to deliver work with disadvantaged group, involve the communities that are in really peripheral regions. And as Sam said earlier, there's some real challenges in those areas already around deprived areas and income and so on. We need to broaden that group. We can do that through paid partnerships, internships even, as we mentioned. And for example, we had some fishers doing a workshop last week, and we made sure we paid them for their time and paid them fairly. Which is one easy way to do that. And we've created a diversity toolkit as well, which you can download from our website, which might have some good ideas for you as well. So in practice, because I think it's all very theoretical so far, we have a marine energy test area where we have primary schools putting in examples of projects, for example, for habitat creation or for better flow floaters. So we do quite a lot on education already that we're happy to share with anyone. And we're taking children and young people to beaches to experience opportunities that happen there and look at coastal erosion and other challenges as well.
That's great, and I love it when you've got things that you can share, because we all need to work together, don't we, to help achieve this agenda. So if people have got tools or tips or guides or whatever, then please do share those. If we go around the circle.
I'm quite happy to go second, because otherwise if you go last, usually everybody's said everything. So I don't have to do too much hard thinking. So for me, I think over the last couple of years, what I've learned is that you have to go and meet people where they're at. And I think if we're really going to be inclusive, we have to understand where they're at. I think there are so many opportunities around collaboration. There are community builders in many towns and cities, and they're really useful souls because they're embedded in their communities. I think if you want to do this work, you have to be genuinely open to being vulnerable, to understanding that you're going to be challenged, that not everybody agrees with what you think, and you spend a lot of time, I spent a lot of time asking how. How can I do that? How can I make that happen for you? How can we change that narrative? How can you be involved? And the work that we're planning to do with the Lottery Project is around handing power to people. And then they can have a say and really advocate for what they believe in, supported by other people.
Such wise words.
It's because I'm so old.
Oh, no. I love about being vulnerable. And the language you use, and being in other people's spaces, taking time and effort to listen and to not feel threatened by what they say is really sound advice.
I think with the CIC coming out that regulators, stakeholders, politicians have been excellent about coming down to the coast, face-to-face meeting and talking to these fishermen, which is vital. You can't have a relationship with these guys unless if you spend time talking to them. But no one knows better what's going on out there than these guys. So I think collaborating, engaging, not discriminating against anyone, having everyone sat at that table is the only way that we're going to be able to work together towards a more sustainable future for our oceans.
Yeah.
I think the funding has to be there, and I think it's a good way to build trust as well, because so often you have these community consultation events or you have these discussions and there's a two-way understanding that the money just isn't there. And when that's the case, I think a bit of defeatism can creep in. So I'm speaking from a local authority perspective. You've probably all seen in the news how screwed all the local authorities are. And so, I know it's a little bit bleak, but I think we've got to focus on the funding for this question as well.
Yeah, so what to add to what everybody's already said. I feel in Wales, as I said in my talk, we've got some really good building blocks in terms of our kind of legislation and ways of working that have a focus on collaboration and involvement. And I feel like my experience of trying to work within that legislation is that there is a great deal of enthusiasm and positivity. People are trying to do their best, so that's really good, but there is so much further to go. And even within NRW, we're 10 years old. It took us 5 years or so to get our integrated coastal management programme together when the penny dropped. We're building those relationships, but we need to get, in fact, only this week reflected that we've now got to kind of refresh our thinking and figure out how we talk to the 250 or so people just internally, not just the 20 or 30 that come to our kind of core group. And represent those different parts of the organisation. So there's quite a lot to do to sort of think about how we can make that happen. But as I say, underpinned by a willingness and enthusiasm, and we've just got to follow through.
Is it 250 people in NRW?
It's 2,500, but about 250 that have some kind of role that involves working on the coast.
The sea and the coast. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Thank you.
Not directly, but just as part of their job. Yeah.
There's nothing worse than going last, is there? I had an answer prepared, but I think actually I wanted to build on 2 points and bring something a bit different. And one is about the funding, and not just public sector funding, but commercial funding. I quite often talk to businesses who are sat in front of their bank manager trying to justify making their rooms accessible or putting in ramps and all kinds of different things that will make their properties more accessible. And the ROI doesn't stack up enough that the bank will lend them the money. So it's not just public sector funding, but also commercial funding, I think is a challenge. And the second point really is, I've never been to this group before. I'm new, if you like, passionate about our coast. And I suppose the second point I make is communication. I didn't stand up when you asked, what's a marine citizen? Because as I turned to Nikki, I said, I don't know what that means. And as soon as you put up your simple explanation, I thought, oh yeah, that's me, I get that, yeah, I'm totally in that room. But I'm not in that room because I'm not speaking the same language. And I think that's probably my one thought really when we think about inclusivity is make it simple, make it easy, and to quote Frozen 2 from my kids, do the best next thing, the right next step. Bring a bit of Disney to this. Why not?
It's great having a newbie in the room because, there's a lot of people who've been here before to Coastal Futures and it can get quite cliquey. And you need that, new perspective on what we're doing and, what we're saying and how we're saying it. Right, so I'm going to start in the room. Has anyone in the room got a question? I am very conscious that there are blinding lights just below that balcony. So if you are on the upper level, you're going to have to do a dance. I'm thinking Gangnam Style to get my attention. Oh, lady in the red. Diana.
Hi, my name's Diana Pound. I'm Director of Dialogue Matters. We define inclusive engagement as sharing more power with a greater diversity of people. And this whole thing about power, I really think we need to get to grips with it, because I think marine sector has done some extraordinary work in really fascinating and interesting ways around connecting with others. But then when you look who's in the room who's actually making the decisions about marine management, in whichever sphere, whether it's fisheries or marine spatial planning or whatever it is, who is in that room? It is largely degreed, white, middle class, quite a lot of males. That's not, there's the power where the decisions are being made, that's not being shared. So I'm sort of not asking a question, I'm sort of saying we've got to factor in power. And just quickly to finish, I'm involved in some international research about sharing power through effective good practice participation for biodiversity outcomes. Does it make a difference? And the answer in short is yes, it does. It makes a difference to outcomes. The sharing power, not just including, not just connecting with.
There are a lot of examples where really good work has been undermined by that decision-making power. And it was one of the parts of your presentation I was really pleased about. One fisherman, one vote, right? There's a lot to be said for that kind of approach. Would anybody like to comment on that comment? You don't have to.
I would just say that the purpose of trying to create marine citizens is actually to give people confidence, because one of the things we found when we talk to people is they really lack the confidence to engage. They don't understand. Heck, I've been working with the local authority for the last 2 years intimately, and I still don't understand the processes, and I think I've probably got enough years of experience to be able to follow it. I still can't. And if I can't do it, how can anyone else speak truth to power? How do they become involved? How can they actually take some control? And what they see is sort of obstacles and a miasma of bureaucracy that they just can't penetrate. I can't, so why would I assume that somebody in a community can? And I think it's really important though that we work out how we get people into a position where they can have a say.
Yeah, can I give a real quick practical example? Diane, was it? So for the Marine Energy Engagement Plan, we're working on creating, yet another group, a steering group, but having those voices in the room. One example that has been part of shaping what that engagement plan looks like has been working with the representative from the traveller community. That's quite a relevant community where we are in Pembrokeshire, to be, feeding into that and making sure that those decisions then feed up the chain, really.
We've got a question or a comment from the internet.
Yeah, it's actually a kind of two-part question. Sorry about that. So the first bit is...
No one enjoys a two-part question. Just
Because you never remember the second part.
How can the conversations with coastal communities like Golspie and others in parts of the UK be initiated and continued when funding is project-based? And the second part is how do we involve more groups in volunteering? It kind of links in with Yvette's talk earlier, when many cannot afford to participate. Volunteering, that is. What can be done to be truly inclusive?
So I think I could start just because you mentioned Golspie. And I think perhaps the best answer I can give is to engage with community groups and community councils as well. Since we lost the Pathfinder funding, we didn't get through to the next round. The main organisation taking things forward is not really the Highland Council anymore, it's the Community Council. So it's local people who are not working for a salary, but they were involved with the project from the very start. And they're our go-to people, and we have these sort of monthly check-ins, and it is while we're waiting for more project funding to come through to continue our work there. We have a very small flood team, and they are completely overwhelmed, the flood team. The Highlands has the biggest coastline of any UK local authority, but I'm sure it's the case for other local authorities as well. And your flood team is not just doing coastal flooding if you're a coastal local authority, they're dealing with pluvial flooding as well, rivers bursting. And it's certainly the case that you can't have a dedicated team member continuing a project when project funding has run out, because the money just isn't there to do that. So I guess what I would say is, if you're in the position where you can go to a community group or to a community council, that's a great place to start. And often, if you can just find one really passionate person, they might be enough just to keep things ticking over until that money comes back in. And then the other option, which is something I don't understand particularly well, is maybe green finance. So looking for opportunities to bring in private investment, possibly setting up a skier or something like that, so you can bring that private money in for nature restoration and then prove to people that this can be a self-funding project in the end, and you don't have to keep waiting for these project pots to come through.
Any more reflections from the panel on?
I think it is a challenge. Project funding is a nightmare, let's all be honest. We've all worked in it. And ultimately, as you say, it comes down to passionate people. And we're lucky that the coast is full of very passionate people who care very deeply about their coast or their area. And it shouldn't come down to relying on those people, but often it does. Just a reflection, really.
Okay, we're going to take another question from the audience. Lady in black. Oh, don't get me singing, Amy.
I'm a singer as well, though, so can't guarantee. I've just forgotten my question, darn it. Perimenopause here, so there you go, that's a bit about me. Brain fog and memory loss, it's so fun. Right, what was I going to say? About funding. So, as we all know, we all want to collaborate. We say this every single year at Coastal Futures, and it's brilliant to see EDI so high on the agenda, front and foremost, because that's where it needs to be. I know from experience over the last few years, we tried to run a pilot in London, in Barking and Dagenham, to try and do transferable skills training through the skills we have in-house at the Thames Estuary Partnership and the Coastal Partnerships Network, recognising that young people don't necessarily want to come into marine science, they don't necessarily want to have a job in conservation, but they can learn transferable skills with us through an environmental lens and try and create that closer connection to their local patch of ocean, the mighty Thames Estuary in this sense. But it was a pilot, and it took us 3 years to convince a funder to take a punt on us. It was innovative, it was not proven, it was a concept. And yeah, we learned a lot of hard lessons about how to work within that frame, and we certainly weren't the right organisation to be doing it at the time. So now we're looking internally to get better and work with others who do that work very well. But my point is that our funding streams are just not set up to support the people that actually make things happen. If we're going to really tackle this and create an inclusive and equal society in which decision-making can be equitable, then we need to be funding the people that actually make this happen, the partnerships, those passionate people, and not thinking about volunteering in citizen science as the be-all and end-all. They could be traineeships, where we actually fund people to train, and whether they go into the environmental sector in the end or not, because they will be ambassadors into the future, into any future career that they have, if they learn it with us. So I think really it's a question to those in the room that are devising government funding streams, private investment streams, philanthropic funding streams. You really need to open up to the possibility of experimentation, of actually failing, being allowed to fail and learn along the way, and funding the people that are actually going to make this happen rather than the hard metrics involved in most of our funding streams at the moment, and really looking at that integrated approach across our socioeconomic and environmental ambitions as a society and as a country. So my question is, what are the funders going to do about it to make it easier for us all to collaborate and work together and learn together?
It's a really challenging question, isn't it? Because funders require outputs, outcomes, KPIs. How do you measure the magic of basically what we're talking about? Has anyone got... Yes.
I've got a quick answer. So some of the funders are getting better, as we know, so let's applaud them. So I actually had a little note on that, so thanks for the setup. So Esme Fairburn, as mentioned earlier by David, Heritage Lottery Foundation, and also the Coast and Sea Partnerships, sort of related coastal capacity building funding, which is ultimately what's government funding. They're good at actually funding that bottom-up stuff, because you can't really have ideas come from the community if you don't have the opportunity to work with the community, and that does need funding. So yeah, if there is any funders in the room, think of that, please. And that means KPIs and outputs can't really be defined before you start. And we've worked with WWF in the past where, you know, that is a challenge. If you come with a ready-made project to community, let's call it Dale and Seagrass, awesome project, but you know, that was really tricky and challenging because the project was too formulated when we came there. And WWF knew that, we all knew that, and we worked at it the best we could, and now it's a really happy project, but it really wasn't for some time.
Yeah. You're right. Anybody else would like to?
Yeah, just really sharing a reflection, because I'm old. This is my theme of the day. When I was chief exec at Sussex Wildlife Trust, the National Lottery funded a 100-year project for which none of us would ever live to see the outcomes, which was one of the earliest rewilding projects in the UK. And it was done through process rather than through outcome. So it's looking at process measures rather than outcome measures. And I think that's a really important thing to think about, because actually what we're talking about with nature and with people is intergenerational change. And that doesn't happen in neat political 5-year cycles or neat 3-year and 5-year funding packages. It takes a lifetime to make a change.
Oh, imagine that, 100 years funding. Ooh. Oh. Question from Hannah? Well, you know, the world outside.
Okay, so this is a question from online. Our coastal and marine heritage is a vastly powerful resource to engage communities in change. How should we do more to better integrate that into decision making for Mandy?
It's a great question. I've worked in the States for a long time, and not only is it brilliant for engaging people, but it's brilliant for making money. Most of the funding for coastal national parks comes from maritime and cultural heritage interaction experiences. But would anyone like to take that one? Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know the answer, I think is the first point, but I'm just going to sort of reflect on the fact that one of the presentations that we had to our kind of internal integrated coastal management programme just before Christmas was from people that had worked on the Cherish project, which was an Wales Island project looking at some of our coastal heritage, collecting lots of data, etc. And one of the really, actually we're in the process, we only met yesterday to talk about what we thought about that presentation and where we could go with it and what we could do with all that data and information sharing. But one of the important things was around kind of building stories of change at the coast, using that kind of cultural and archaeological heritage to understand that coastal environments have always changed over the very, 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 very long time, and that people have always had to adapt. And I think that is, I think you were saying the same about the sort of history of Golspie and things, but it's really important to set that kind of long-term context, because it perhaps makes us feel slightly less panicky about some of the pressures that we're facing now. Yes, I don't know the answer to how we can involve it more, but we're certainly thinking about how we can work better with that kind of historic and archaeological sector to build the stories, really.
Is this Lydia?
Would you like to?
Yeah, so thanks for letting me plug our Coast Explorer app. So there's the Wales Coast Explorer app. It's a free app. Download it now. But on that, we've worked with partners to have an archaeology section, so people can get involved with that. And we then also run sessions on the coast, free to anyone to join, to come and learn more. It's a very small-scale project, really, in the grand scheme of things, but it's one extra way to get people involved, and through sort of different sort of technological approaches as well.
I suppose there's a lovely link to natural capital and using people to help value, or what it is they value about these particular cultural assets or historical. I live in Portsmouth, I can't bear it. It's all Mary Rose and Trafalgar and Victoria, but I know there are people that value these things. We'll find them and we'll ask them. Could we do another question in the audience? There's, where there's some, is it a bat, a bird, Superman? Who is it? Has somebody up there got a question? No? Ah, we'll just sing stars. Well, then we have one right here, if that's all right to go with.
Thanks. It's about the involvement of coastal communities. I come from a small village, not very many people, a few hundred people. And very recently, in fact, within the last month, a seaweed farm company, a commercial company, wanted to put a 150-hectare seaweed farm in the middle of the bay. It displaced a few fishermen. What they thought, well, that doesn't matter too much. In the end, though, 2/3 of the adult population turned out for a public meeting to object, and did such research in all directions that the company withdrew the application. I think it's a great example of what coastal communities are about and what they can do, but it also does have an element of, are you allowed NIMBYism in a sense, because seaweed farms are very worthy in many ways. So I'd be interested in the panel just giving their view on where coastal communities, their view holds totally, or a wider ecological view might have some credence.
Oh, it's a toughie. And it's really on topic, isn't it? That was in the news last week, was it? Yeah. No. It's kind of local, coastal priority over national, or more kind of global.
But to me, I think it's really important, and I'd love to talk to you more later, because I'm really interested in that lived experience, to be honest, because we are working in Pembrokeshire on seaweed and shellfish, sort of local Pembrokeshire network and bringing people together. That's the workshop we did last week, where we paid for the fishers and made them part of the room. By no means easy, still super controversial. But in terms of that example, my question really back to you is, like, were people involved early enough? And that's what, I kind of go, I bet they weren't involved early enough, but there is sort of mixed reviews that I've heard back, so maybe we can discuss that later.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you all, and thank you all for listening as well. It's been a great session, and now we get to refuel and